You are listening
You're listening
to
Not Elsewhere
Classified.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Not Elsewhere Classified podcast. For this session, I guess we're going to go ahead and do an introduction, or what's called maybe episode 0. What I'm going to do is talk about a little bit about myself, talk a little bit about Medical Coding Geek, talk about the Not Elsewhere Classified podcast. I'm sure you have a lot of questions as why is this podcast coming about, and who are you, and what is Medical Coding Geek? And this session should answer some, if maybe most of the questions, and perhaps give you an idea of what we're going to do. Okay, so I guess let's start with myself. My name is Brian Quee. I am a registered health information administrator and also a clinical documentation improvement practitioner. I have both my credentials from RHIA. My education is from Florida International University. I graduated with a bachelor's in health information management back in 2003. Since then, also going back, I was also the president of the Health Information Management Student Association for FIU, if that helps. And once I graduated in 2003, I actually obtained my RHIA in 2004. And during that time, as far as work experience, I have been working in healthcare since 2001. I started out my first healthcare job as a nursing home coordinator. Not nursing home admissions coordinator, and then eventually moved into the actual hospital field, working in radiology as a radiology file clerk. Can you believe that? This is before the advent of the PACS, or Patient Archival Communication System. And then I graduated. Then through internships, I found myself working in health information management as a technician. And then after that, I obtained my RHIA and decided, you know what, once I have my RHIA, I think everybody suffers from this, is where they get their credential and they think they can conquer the world. And so immediately I thought, you know what, I deserve a director position. And so I went ahead and found myself working in a jail management system where I was managing the medical records, and I did that for a year. And then eventually I found myself into clinical documentation improvement, which I've been doing for the past 11 years. During the time that I was working in health information management, I was also teaching. I taught for a couple universities face-to-face, and I've been doing online teaching for the past, I would like to say, since 2010, so about 6 to 7 years of online teaching. I'm recently acquired as a subject matter expert for CDI, so I also do twice a week CDI sessions. So there's a lot of me using my voice, right? And I guess since I've been using my voice and people give me feedback on it seems like they enjoy doing it. I wanted to take it to the next level and bring it up to a podcast. But before that, before even coming to the podcast, I was at a point where I think in my teaching that I could do more. And so I decided to become a tutor. And in 2015, in April, I decided to create a profile page on this website that's called Tutor Universe. And immediately when I created that profile, I already had like a week's worth of clients. And what I had found out is that in 2015, of course, was the pivotal moment of when ICD-9 transitioned into ICD-10. So there were a lot of people who were trying to obtain their credentials while it was still in ICD-9. So I was trying to teach ICD-9, and get everybody ready for their credentials before it transitioned over. Even after it transitioned in October 1st, 2015, there were still people who needed that push because of that new transition from ICD-9 to ICD-10. So as a result of that, business was very good. And so I needed to find a way to market it. And one way of marketing that I had known is through social media. So I had found myself coming on into Facebook and also LinkedIn, but primarily Facebook. So I created a page. It was called Brian Kui Private Medical Coding and HIT Tutor. That was my name. Now, can you imagine trying to market that out? It's like, well, that's a pretty long name and it's kind of boring. So what had happened was I needed to create a brand. And with this brand, I think I wanted for people to connect with this brand and not just say, well, this guy is a geek, but perhaps relate to the brand and say, well, I'm also a geek too. So as I stated, it's medical coding geek, and it took a couple, tries at it. And actually I wanted to be medical coding nerd or medical coding tutor, but it wasn't really working that way. But somehow I asked my colleagues and friends and asked their opinion is, should it be nerd or should it be geek? And because I guess the understanding of geek is that it's more sociable. So to call the brand Medical Coding Geek would be more sociable, especially being applied into social media. And so there you have it. You have Medical Coding Geek. So now I have the brand. And now what? And what I had found out is, I went into Facebook, and this is during a time where Facebook groups was slowly progressing and moving forward. I think it's already been existing, but I never realized that there was so many medical coders in Facebook groups. So I just, when you type in Facebook, you type in medical coding and you find a list of groups. So I decided, let's just find one. So I joined one, I joined a couple, realizing that some worked, some didn't. And, people were posting questions about coding. I was answering them. And then I use a tagline that would connect to my what at the time was Brian Kui, Private Medical Coding Tutor. And there was a person by the name of Lori Woods who actually saw me doing this and kind of scooped me up and said, hey, you know what? I have a group. It's called Create a Coder. I think it would be beneficial if you come in and help out and perhaps see if there's anybody who needs tutoring in my group. So I much obliged and joined on in. And there you go. So I continued that forward, answering questions in places where most people were. And as a result of that, you gain more of a reputation. And, moving forward, I decided to create my own group. It's called Medical Coding Geeks. And then I expanded it out to a health information technology group, which is geared for the RHIA and the RHIT exam. And then I think at that time, I had also obtained my CDIP. So I was fresh taking that exam. So I decided to create a CDI network group. So you guys can definitely check those out. So with these groups, there's a lot of interaction. And with this interaction, you see a lot of questions. And with these questions, you see a lot of commonalities. There are a lot of common questions that are asked, especially from different aspects in terms of coding, in terms of specialties, in terms of job placement, in terms of career development. And so there's a lot of questions that come about, but I think I try to, it's easy to answer them typing, but I think I had felt it best to answer it in a more verbal or even a video format. So I actually tried doing video for some time, but to schedule a time where you have to look good and get everything ready, it made it seem more difficult. So in 2016, I wanted to create a podcast. Initially, it was going to be called the Medical Coding Geeks or Medical Coding Geek Podcast, but I think that was not. I created something, but it never really moved forward. I had all the pieces, but I never put it together. And so I actually created something, but it never fell through. But coming into now, I think I have all the pieces together. I have all the equipment. And, I'm ready to do a podcast, but then I didn't want to call it the Medical Coding Geeks podcast. It kind of sounded too predictable. So I wanted to create a name that relates to medical coders, that relates to health information. And so I decided to create what's called Not Elsewhere Classified. And so for those that are listening and perhaps not in the medical coding industry, Not Elsewhere Classified is basically a designation where, it's something that cannot be best described, or it cannot be labeled as something that, that you can't put an exact label on it. There's also unspecified, meaning that when a doctor documents a specific diagnosis but doesn't give a specific type, then that's unspecified. Or in terms of Not Elsewhere Classified, NEC, perhaps they provided a specific type, but there is no classification for that type. So Not Elsewhere Classified to me really sounds more like something that works outside of the box. And so I believe this Not Elsewhere Classified podcast will do that. Surprisingly, this is not my first time using Not Elsewhere Classified. Back in 2009, this is way before the Medical Coding Geek and the tutoring and all of this. 2009, I actually found myself wanting to blog. So you can tell that I'm always wanting to share something. So in 2009, I actually created a blogger, or what's called Blogspot. This is a platform, a blogging platform by Google. So I actually had created it. It was called Not Elsewhere Classified. And looking back at it, I felt that I wasn't ready to do that. I was not in a position to be telling people about my experiences, especially since I just recently started. And I was mainly a new CDI specialist. I only had 1 year of directorship. I had about 2 to 3 years as a clerical. And I was just starting out teaching. I was not in a position to be more of a subject matter expert or be somebody to tell somebody the best advice I can, because I don't think I had that. So I kind of, again, put that off to the side. But surprisingly, I still have that website, notelsewhereclassified.blogspot.com. And I looked at it previously before, and it was funny because I also wanted to get into healthcare recruiting. But again, that didn't fall through back in 2009. So that's where we're at. So that's a little bit of a bonus understanding about Not Elsewhere Classified. So finally, what can you expect from this podcast? And so there's a lot of things, especially from a medical coding, from a health information management or health information technology standpoint, and also even clinical documentation improvement. My main goal is to connect with professionals that are out there in the healthcare industry and bring them here. It's a space where they can feel free to communicate. This is not necessarily like a webinar or something that is very scripted. Okay. A lot of the times when I pre-screen some of the guests, I tell them, look, this is as if I'm going to sit down with you and we're going to have coffee and we're just going to have a great conversation. And that's what I want to do, is I want to bring the conversations between myself, representing you guys. Of course, if you have any questions, you can definitely let me know at medicalcodinggeek.com, or also on our Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. You can check us out at medcodinggeek. And so if you have any questions in specifically on the guests that I will have, we can definitely bring those forward to them and make them aware. So it's not just going to be medical coding. It's going to be a wide variety of topics, even not just it may not even be medical coding or HIM or CDI related. It could be something more personal development. It could be job related. It could be career related. So there's a lot of aspects. You could even talk about mental health in regards to working and burnout, and there's a lot of things that we can definitely address. So that's pretty much what we're going to do with this podcast. And I hopefully what I want to do starting out is, you know, perhaps start off with maybe two episodes a month, or also maybe one episode every other month. And hopefully as we progress, and hopefully as the word gets out with this podcast, we can definitely find some more guests. And I'm always asking the people that I do an interview first before doing the recording, is I let them know this. If you know at least two people that would be a great guest on this podcast, please let me know. Okay, so we're definitely want to make sure that we have a good series of guests coming in. So if you know somebody and you feel that they would be a great person to share their knowledge, share their experience, share their insights, by all means, please send them our way. Okay, so that's about it. It's a brief episode, but definitely the next few episodes that you will hear, they'll definitely be longer than mine, because it sounds kind of weird if I'm going to interview myself. But with these people that are coming up, definitely they'll be talking a lot of stuff, and mainly a lot of the stuff that I try to get on the podcast are mainly from the discussion in our groups. So if you're not in our groups, Medical Coding Geeks, RHIA and RHIT exam support, or the Clinical Documentation Network on Facebook, please join the groups. I'd be more than willing to accept you guys, and then join in on the conversation. You'd be surprised, some of the conversations might lead for me to go out and find somebody who can best answer the question. As much as I want to answer all the questions and put them on a podcast, I don't think many of you don't want to listen to me talk every episode. So I would rather bring in somebody who has the best insight, has the best knowledge, and share that with you. Okay, so again, thank you guys very much, and I'm looking forward to our next episode, and I'm looking for an endeavors with Not Elsewhere Classified. Thank you guys very much. Coming up on the next episode of Not Elsewhere Classified.
Classmates and coworkers and people, I think my main message overall, if I put everything that I harp on together, probably just sums up to: don't hesitate to try and don't hesitate to help.
medicalcodinggeek.com